The battle for the mind of North America will be fought in the video arena. The television screen is the retina of the mind's eye. Therefore, the television screen is part of the physical structure of the brain.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to episode 11, unbelievably enough, of The Outer Reels. I'm here with Jason.
Hello.
And today we're talking about Deathcheaters, not Death Chasers, as I like to call it many times.
God, I did it every time. Every time I went to look it up for anything. Death Chasers. No, it's Death Cheaters.
Dyslexia is hard in this one. So this is 1976. I picked this movie because I feel like I was gonna try and avoid it at first, but I've just decided, you know what, this whole season is just gonna be the Brian Trenchard-Smith hour. And so
on your side, not mine.
Yeah, right, exactly. So
yeah.
I've got many of those to dive on, and because I keep mentioning Grant Page, I thought this is a good way to sort of showcase who he is and what he is, because he was a prominent stuntman, as I've mentioned before, but also perpetually trying to break out into acting as many chances as he get. He was very much similar to Hal Needham in the sense that started as a stuntman, wanted to get into the other elements of filmmaking, and while he did do some acting and stuff like that, he still really is known as a great stunt recorder and stunt coordinator and everything else. He is the guy of Australia.
It is definitely fun. It's weird in a lot of ways. Like sometimes it's very screwball, and other times it's kind of takes itself a little too seriously. But it is a fun movie. Screwball
is a great term for some of the music cues and stuff in this movie, for sure.
Oh, without a doubt.
So to get straight into it, let's say it's 1976, Jason, and you're in the elevator and you run into George Miller, because this is going to be the perfect fit. And this is before George has made Mad Max.
That's true. So
how do you sell him this movie?
Well, I got this stuntman buddy who has basically sketched out a whole bunch of really cool stunts, and I think I've put together a bit of a narrative to tie it all together. Because that's really all this is.
That is absolutely the conversation that happened in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make a bunch of creative stunts situations, and then they kind of tie it all together with a loose narrative.
And let's be clear, I love movies like this because you also see this in the visual effects world. Whenever there's effects guys and they all get together and make a movie and it's just full of practical gags, like, you know, it's another case of like, let's come up with a bunch of reasons where we can blow up a torso or do something or whatever, or have somebody fall through a glass. Like, it's the same thing, except this is the stunts instead of the VFX side of things.
Yeah, the VFX side of things would be how you end up with like Skyline.
Yeah, that giant fluid sim with all the people getting sucked up into the thing. Yeah,
exactly. So, which I didn't hate, but I was shocked to discover there's like 3 or 4 sequels to it.
I know. Now. Or there's another good one, Virus with Jamie Lee Curtis. Kind of like The Thing meets Hardware on an oil tanker, but made by a bunch of effects guys and got lots of good effects in it.
I did see this. Yeah. Now I remember this. Okay.
What else can I say about this? I think if I was going to pitch this movie, going with the theme of this, the attempted story in this is that 2 stuntmen get rolled up with a secret agency and then are sent out to fight crime or solve a mission that a government can't be involved in.
Yeah, but let's point out that doesn't happen until halfway through the movie.
No, a lot longer. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't start the mission until an hour in.
Exactly. And
of a 90-minute movie.
And I thought the same thing, and I was really like, this should happen at like the 28-minute mark, and on the first act turn. So, which we don't get to. But the log line from the poster, which I really enjoyed, is meet Stephen Rudd, stuntmen, saboteurs, hellraisers.
Except they're one of the 3. But,
yes.
I guess you could kind of say they're Hellraisers, but
Yeah. And we're going to talk about a lot of gags in this movie, which they really try and stretch the gags out to somehow tie them into the plot line. And it's like you said, it's like your pitch to George Miller. It's a list of stunts they can do, and how do you try and put a common thread through there?
right. Right. It's I mean they do some of it fairly well. Like there's a few things that happen early on in the movie and you realize that it's all a precursor to the stuff later. But it is funny how long it takes to get to there. And I don't mean it to sound like this movie feels long, because it doesn't. It's a brisk 90 minutes and it plays well and it's fun and stuff, but it is so funny that when you get to what's supposed to be the meat of the story, you're 50 some odd minutes into the movie before you really realize the whole point of it all, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a slow burn getting up to that point.
Yeah, but not slow in general. It's just it's fun. Like there's, the movie starts with when I first started watching it, I was like, did I click on the wrong link? Because we watched this on Tubi, and I thought it was a fired up movie, but it's a whole bunch of like medieval knights and stuff in questionable costumes. But as it turns out, there's an excuse for that, which you find at the very end of the movie in the end tag. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. But it's like a medieval
It felt like
fight.
a Ren fair.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's one guy with a bow and arrow dressed up like Errol Flynn from Robin Hood. It's just thinking like, by the 70s, you could have done better. But, the tag at the end of the movie explains why they look like they do, which is fine.
Right.
But, you've got an Australian playing a German again, who's the director of this whole sequence.
He's a pretty funny character. He's really overhammed with the turtleneck and everything.
Way over the top. He's got a monocle.
Yeah. Yes.
A monocle and a black beret.
Yeah. And like a riding crop as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the white turtleneck and stuff, but acting as a director and very, very, very over the top.
Yeah, and while this is playing out, there's all the classic horse gags and jumping gags, and there's a burn as well, which is actually, I believe that's Grant Page's introduction in the movie. He storms out of this hut on fire, and he lays down, and they put him out. And, you can see the camera crew at this point, so it's revealed that they're filming something. And there's a car that pulls up, and there's a guy who later we're introduced to as Culpepper, is kind of just like watching from the side, and he's in like a limousine or something like that. He's suspiciously keeping eye on things.
Yeah, so Culpepper, he's in this car. It's got flags on it, like it's a diplomat car or something, which I just thought for what we later find out is essentially a head of a spy agency.
Right.
He is not subtle.
No, exactly. And I at first was like, oh yeah, like he's a producer or something like that. Like,
exactly.
I think he's involved in the film side of things.
It's exactly what you think. He's the producer of the show, wheeling up, seeing it, and continues on like, yeah, okay, they got it. Fine, I don't need to be here.
Yeah. And so we should just, a couple more things about Grant Page that I had here is, since this is his big intro in the movie. So obviously, I've talked about him, like, him from Mad Max and, some other stuff from American stuff like Death Ship, Road Games, which I talked about a while back, with Stacy Keach. Mm-hmm. And a bigger American movie, these are all movies he was either a stuntman or stunt coordinator on, was No Escape from 1994 with Ray Liotta.
Oh, yeah.
Great movie. We
have talked about that movie together before, but not on the show.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned to you that movie was released in Australia, because I love alternate titles, as Escape from Absalom.
Right.
Which is a strange one. Other stuff that Grant did was he was the stunt coordinator for Jackie Chan, Mr. Nice Guy, of course, because that was shot in Australia. So that tracks. And his last movie was Furiosa. And like I said, he died in March this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
From a car accident, out of all things.
Wow.
He's 80 years old. Yeah, not a huge amount of acting roles, but his acting stuff, this is his big showcase lead role of all of his movies. And again, it's like the same thing where it's like he's a stuntman trying to break into acting, and sort of did both. He was first acting role was in 1975 in a movie called The Man from Hong Kong, which is going to show up in this season. Also, a Brian Trenchard-Smith movie. And I think you're going to like this movie because this movie stars George Lazenby, and it's a Kung Fu Sydney movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have not heard of this, but anything that's got, the least favorite Bond.
Exactly.
Is with me. And nothing against George Lazenby because, well, I mean,
I have everything against him.
A lot against George Lazenby. I mean, but nothing against. She's meant to say is nothing against her on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is one of my favorite Bond films. So.
We could. If we ever talk about Bond movies, I have a lot to say to you about that because that is not the right approach, my friend.
No, it's a good script. It is a good script. It's not well.
It's not Moonraker.
Yeah, that is true.
Essentially, so after this little showcasing of this Ren Fair stunt film crew thing going on, we go out to the sand dunes and there's a TV commercial being filmed.
Right. Yep. And they're on a dune buggy essentially.
Yes.
Ripping around.
And we get introduced. We get introduced to the other partner in crime in this movie, John Hargraves, played as Steve Hole. So he is on camera trying to sling like an undercoating for a vehicle, and Grant Page is just like ripping around in the background in the sand dunes on his buggy. And this is like some other commercial that they're doing. And the Steve Hole, he was in the 80s as far as Australian actors. He was really fast climbing the ladder. He was right there with Brian Brown and Mel Gibson. He was in a movie called Sky Pirates from 1986, which you probably remember. And also in a classic Aussie movie, Malcolm, which I wouldn't put in this show because it's extremely popular, but it's like a grittier version of Mr. Gadget from Australia. It's kind of fun, though. He does a bank robbery, and he makes this car that splits in half and turns into a motorcycle, and it's kind of fun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, kind of some cool stuff. But the thing with John Hargraves is he was known to he had that classic Australian style
mustache.
Yeah, I had that. But he was also a very Australian by character in the sense that he didn't really chase after these roles, and he sort of said, yeah, it'll come to me. And he wasn't known for like liaising at like Hollywood parties and showing up and stuff like that. And he never really, he never thought, oh, I'll get an agent and I'll seek these out. And in a lot of interviews he had where he's like, no, the work will come to me. And during that time, Brian Brown, of course, got more popular in Australia, but obviously Mel Gibson really blew up, and he just sort of went by the wayside. He ended up dying in 1996 from AIDS.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so both our leading men are no longer with us in this. So during this commercial being shot on the sand dunes, like a police car drives by and there's a shootout going on.
Yeah. And they just kind of stop and look, and the whole crew just kind of looks like, oh, check that out. And our two heroes hop in the dune buggy and make chase.
Yeah, it's like, let's fight some crime, guys, in our stunt vehicle.
And it's a pretty cool sequence. They go ripping along and they zip up behind. And what's awesome is one guy's driving, the other guy's basically holding onto the roll bar on the back.
Yeah, there's not even
standing
seats
there.
in it. Yeah.
No, he doesn't have a seat or anything. He's just kind of every now and then he kind of kneels down and stuff. But the car that they're chasing has a guy with a gun in it who was shooting at the cops. And they just kind of come right up behind it, try to bump it and stuff. And that's when I realized the guy with the gun has like this orange knitted cap on.
It's a tea cozy. It looks like
a tea cozy. Yeah.
Like if you're going to go rob a bank and shoot up the cops, you're like, I'm going to take that beanie that grandma knitted for me.
Yeah, grandma made this for him. He loves it. It's a wild choice.
Yeah,
there's some insane costume choices in this movie, though.
Yes, yeah, this is the first taste of that, but definitely I was like, what the hell? This is extremely bizarre.
Yeah, so a chase ensues, and what impressed me was they get towards a market and the car goes basically barreling into it, and they slow down enough to drop Now it's Grant Page driving, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. Is it Rod's driving? So he dumps Steve, and Steve basically gets dumped by literally just jumping off
Yep.
and then rolling.
It's another
And
stunt gag for the sake of a stunt gag.
yeah, and I was like, it was like, and he did it, and it's not like the camera sped up or anything else. Nope, he just threw himself off of that thing behind a car and jumps up and then runs into a market where a woman's buying a leg of lamb, and he takes it before the guy can put it in the bag and runs out with it.
And meanwhile, you cut to Grant Page decides to just drive over a bunch of cars in the parking lot, like a monster truck.
Nice, conveniently placed Volkswagen Beetle that with his oversized dune buggy tires, he can just use as a ramp. And yeah, it was just, it's cool. It's fun. It's well done. And that's when, they get back together again. Somehow now they're in front. The car's coming straight for them, and they throw the leg of lamb through the windshield.
But
which doesn't stop them. It just confuses them.
Yeah, and it's just this strange shot, and he's got this giant, like, caveman style hunk of lamb, and he lobs
Fred
it
Flintstone
through.
would love it.
Totally. He lobs it through the front windshield of the bad guy's car, and then they just drive off, but it just flies through the center. And now here is a moment I must point out to you that since we're here talking about Brian Trenchard-Smith movies, do you remember the last time Brian Trenchard-Smith used a leg of lamb?
Well, no, you're going to remind me, obviously.
In Frog Dreaming, when he goes fishing for the donkagen.
Oh, that's right. It's a leg of lamb from from his uncle's fridge. That's right.
So I'm like, why has he got every movie? There's some leg of lamb gets thrown in.
Well, 8 or 10 years later, he's like, no one's going to remember this gag.
Right. I guess so.
Unless it's something he slips into all his movies because that dude loves lamb.
Yeah, I did think that was a funny coincidence there.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's also a cutaway here at some point back to, again, Culpepper, who we haven't been introduced to. And we cut to his office, and there's a Newton's Cradle there as well.
Yes, I got that note. It's like, yeah, another Newton's Cradle.
I was like,
this one's being used properly, at least.
I was wondering, it's like, did these just get released in Australia? Are they like more popular now? Everybody's wanting to use them. And through this sequence is probably the first part where I was like, did a bit of a head tilt on the musical choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is an action movie. Maybe they're trying to go for like a spy vibe, but the only thing I could feel for as far as the music, I was like, is this Gil Malay? It has this jazz to it,
A little bit, yeah. It's very, very synthy though.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, it's the 70s and the synthesizers are new and stuff. But yeah, it's there's some funny choices there for sure.
I guess Rod and Steve end up catching these guys. And
right, I got a note here. Like the cops just let them do this for them. Like it's just like, it's so weird, and they're just like, "Yeah, go on." Like by all means. Of course, you find out later on these guys are all in the employ of Culpepper,
right? Which
makes sense. But at the time, I was like, "What is going on?" So then I actually put a note here. Are these guys supposed to be superheroes?
Yeah, because
like
that's the vibe you get from him. Because the police chief's there. He's like, "Thanks again, guys," and pats them on the shoulder as if like they're the guys, local heroes, just saving the day.
Yeah, it's like he knows them already, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you find out later on, no, they have no idea who each other are at all. They've never met before, and yeah,
really strange. You're just like, okay, so these just guys, they're stuntmen, but they also fight crime just casually and get local thanks or whatever, and then. From that, we transition right away where the cops tell them like, oh yeah, there was another robbery in town. The bank robbers locked a bunch of people in the vault, and the people in the vault are stuck and they're running out of oxygen. And can you guys help?
Yep. And help they do. And that's where, so they're top of what I found out is like the Sydney Hotel, which I guess is like 6 or 7 stories, and I guess it was probably considered pretty tall at the time.
Yeah.
But they're up at the top, and they basically rappel down with a big ass drill and drill a hole. Like they have the guy show them where the vault is, and they're looking at blueprints. Like, okay, great. And they rappel down. It looks like about a floor.
Yeah. From
the top of the building down. So this vault now is on the top of this building, which makes zero sense whatsoever. But they drill the hole in, they run the line down, and then they cut to the guy inside. And it's like, oh, good, and he plugs it in. It's like, so there's no vault there; it's an office, and he plugs it into his fish tank. And the fish now is like, it's just a goldfish too, which doesn't need it. And then,
And there's a bit more
good.
drama of the build up to it because, he's getting his rig ready and he's strapping himself in and he's tying himself down.
Yeah.
He's got all these carabiners and stuff. And he starts abseiling down the side of the building with this drill. And you quickly realize that this is a very thin plot device to get a gag where he rappels down the side of a building. Because that,
Yeah.
it was a big deal
Yeah.
back then for
Yeah.
stunts.
Nowadays, it would all be CG anyway. They would never actually do it.
No, I know.
Or it'd be on a stage
Yeah.
and they'd be 4 feet in the air.
I was
But,
very
yeah.
confused once this guy got the hose and put it in a fish tank. I was laughing, but I was like, what is actually going on here? Like, did these guys know they're being played right now, or why is this happening? I really wasn't sure where it was going.
Yeah, it was odd, and that's when I realized, oh, they're being tested for something. And sure enough, it's just, Culpepper's been running through their paces to see if they could do this thing for them.
The movie does kind of move because it's way of it just trying to be stunt gag after stunt gag, and the way they stitch it together is pretty thin. And so I think we end up at the gym with Steve and his girlfriend.
Right.
And
working out while having a fight.
yeah, that's right. And then he just has a random. He's telling her how he met Rod and why they're buddies. And then they have
Right.
he has this Vietnam flashback.
Yep.
And
With it looks like no Vietnamese shooting at him.
no. And there's a weird because there's some stock footage of Vietnam, and then it cuts to
They're
one
U.S. helicopters as well. Yeah,
and then
I saw that.
And then it cuts to one shot of the two of them lying in the bush side by side, and they meet each other, and that's it. And it doesn't intercut very well, like as far as
What's awesome is they meet each other by Steve's like lying in the mud and hunkered down, and then Rod comes flying in beside him, rolls over his back,
yeah.
it's down beside him, and introduces himself. It's a funny scene, but you realize, okay, they're buddies because they go way back to Vietnam.
And they're kind of lighthearted too, the way they talk in Inum. He's like, "Oh, nice to meet you, mate." And they're like, "Yeah, cool," like as if they've just met at the pub or something like that.
Yeah, except he's obviously having a flashback.
Yeah.
Like a traumatic flashback in the gym because he just kind of freezes. And it's kind of cool because they cut to it for a second, then they cut back to him at the gym, and then they go back into it, and then they go into it. So it's like you get this.
Then another strange thing happens. We just cut over to Rod. He gets held at gunpoint.
Oh yeah, well he's expecting a woman to come by.
Oh, that's
and
right. He's got a date.
He's got a date, and I think this is where I made another note about the costumes because he's basically wearing like a super short floral kimono, with like white pants and tall brown boots.
He looks cool.
And sure, it's a look. But he's talking to the dog, saying he's got this woman coming by, and he gives like 3 different names. So
Yeah. He's living the life. He is just the number one stunt man in the country, and he's got all his designer clothes. He's got this house at the beach.
Yep.
He's got this super cool dog. He's listening to records with his dog. Like he is living the
dog's
bachelor.
wearing the headphones.
Yes. I love that dog, man.
Yeah, with the the headphones over the ears.
Yes.
Like, the ears are down, and it's quite funny. But it was very cute.
It's charming. Yeah.
And I guess that's when who's Culpepper's henchman.
Uncivil servant?
Oh, that must be him. Yeah. I guess he doesn't get a name. So he shows up. He's got a white suit with a carnation in its lapel and a pencil thin mustache. He looks like.
But you know who this was though, right? That this was actually Ralph Cottarelli who played Gray in the Chain Reaction.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I did not realize that.
Yes.
Wow.
I know.
Wow. Yeah. So he shows up at gunpoint, and Rod is not, phased at all by this, rather skinny guy with a gun until like this giant guy pulls up behind him
Yeah.
with a huge ass with, basically a machine gun. And he's like, oh, okay. So he goes with him. But
It's a strange way that he's kidnapped or arrested, but he's not. Yeah, you're right. He doesn't seem fazed about
yeah,
it, but it should be serious.
no, well, exactly. I mean, they're being taken. He's being taken hostage essentially, and you find out it's just because they don't want him to say no about where he's going. So yeah, and he dumps him in an office building, I guess. The floor is completely empty, and there's Steve already there.
Yeah, and they
It's
kind of
like,
like jump each other, right? Like he's thinking he's being
yeah,
attacked. He's like, "Whoa!"
yeah. Well, yeah, Steve's in the room and he's hunched down, and then like Rod comes flying out of the elevator and does a somersault, and they're like, "Oh, it's just you."
They're just totally being stuntmen at this point. Like,
Yeah.
and then
Well, to the point where they hear the elevator again, and and one climbs on the shoulders of the other. Like it's just like they've pre-planned this
for
or whatever.
some
Nope,
weird,
just stops up there.
like he's gonna like ambush whoever's in the elevator because they don't know what's
Yeah,
happening, and yeah, it's
and they're
very
right at the
strange.
edge, and of course the doors open. It's the elevator behind them, not the one they're at.
Funny gag, actually. I enjoyed that.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some funny stuff in here.
Yeah, so then they get taken up to like
Lawn bowling.
lawn
green.
bowls. That's right. I haven't thought of lawn bowls in
Yeah.
a long time. And man, that is a nice lawn bowl field. You see the view of that over the harbor bridge, and you can,
Well, it's funny because he says it's got a great view, and they don't show it to you right away.
yeah,
It's like, it's like usually you'd cut to it or give us a wide shot. Nope, you're going to wait 14 more seconds before we show you this view, maybe even a minute.
they're having some cocktails, and that's when Rod looks around, and you notice some of the guys playing lawn bowls are the bank robbers from the beginning that he threw the leg of lamb at.
And the cops.
Yes, Culpepper mentioned something about some D-Mob documents that were lost in Vietnam. He's thinking that something about how them becoming stuntmen isn't great for their career, or he's like, you guys are bigger or better than this. You shouldn't be stuntmen. Like he's sort of saying that's a lowly sort of gig.
This is where they point out they have no interest in killing. They, and they don't like working for anyone because essentially they're just a two-man stunt team.
Right.
They work for themselves.
And they're happy with it. They love it. They've got the great lifestyle.
Yep.
They're at the top of their game. So they have Culpepper then is like, well, look, you passed the test. They're like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, we had skeptics in our department, so we set you guys up for the test. And he explains that the car robbery in the vault was all of a gag to try and see if they could pull the jobs off. I mean, on paper, this is a true first, second act break at 30 minutes in, but you kind of want all this. The whole movie should have been the first act, almost.
Yeah.
Rod and Steve just kind of say no, right?
yeah.
And then,
Well, no, because he makes a point of telling me, you don't have to tell me now. I don't want to know now. I'm not going to give you a time limit. You just tell me when you're ready. Because he knows if they stew on it, they're going to do it.
yes, that's right. And then we just cut to them back to their regular life, and they're rehearsing a fight scene.
Yeah. and they're like they're at Steve's house, I guess, because his wife's there. And yeah, they're like, he's got a lovely view and stuff too. He's up off the ocean and stuff. But they're having this fight, and they hit this well. And that well is obviously fake and placed there.
Right.
Because the whole thing kind of moves. And but yeah, they're beating the crap out of each other essentially, and they're while talking about this, and you're supposed to think that they're fighting each other over it, but then you quickly realize, oh, they've got storyboards there and stuff, and they're just mapping it out.
I think Steve takes his girlfriend to like an art gallery. It seems to be the only backstory we get about them is Steve talking to his girlfriend. So he said that like the whole platoon was wiped out in Nam other than him and Rod. You see another shot where it's a flashback. Rod saves Steve from like a punji pit or something.
Oh, right, yeah, because when he steps into the loop that grabs him by the ankle and pulls up, he makes a lot of noise.
Yeah.
For someone out in the jungle fighting a war. It's like, yeah.
And like, I mean, the typical traps and stuff in Nam were not elaborate. Like this is, they usually like some punji pit. This thing picks him up, inverts him, and swings him under like a spike rack. This looks something like John Rambo set up in First Blood,
Yeah. It's not like a typical Vietnam thing because, usually you'd walk into a pit or you would, with spikes in it or whatever or something. Yeah, this is really elaborate.
What it looks like is a trap in Vietnam set up and designed by stuntmen.
Yes. Except it doesn't look like Vietnam. It looks like Australia.
Oh, yeah. Completely.
It's like, those are gum trees. It's like,
He does mention to his wife, he's like, he doesn't get the rush anymore. That like he used to from doing stunts.
And he needs it.
Exactly.
He needs it.
And the only thing that made him feel equivalent was doing these stunts, and it's starting to wear thin, which is a bit of a plot device to make him double, to make him think more and more about this offer from Culpepper. Like,
exactly. So basically, we know from the start they're going to do it. And when next time they get together, like, so are we doing it? It's like, yeah. And that's when Culpepper, I guess, takes them to.
Not quite yet, because Rod has another date.
Oh, right. And it's a long. This woman takes forever to walk there.
Yeah, this is a long shot.
Yeah.
Rod's now in like this really cool puffy shirt, and
it's a pirate shirt.
Yes,
total pirate shirt.
Seinfeld pirate shirt, and he's hanging out with Bismarck, his dog, and he's waiting for his date. But he's the classic stuntman playboy, right? He doesn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good music here. This is some of the better. There's this good like 70s like funky crime music, which I quite like. Like we said, the musical choices are weird, but it isn't a score. It's almost like pieces, like songs. There's no common thread. They're all quite different.
Yeah, they're all what we'd call our needle drops.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all essentially like probably pulled from a library and just peppered throughout.
Yeah. Rod has his date, and we get another champagne bottle pop.
Yep. Subtle.
Yeah.
They're jogging together on the beach to discuss it. And I couldn't help but notice they're both wearing jeans.
It's the 70s, man.
It is the 70s. They did everything in jeans.
Think about every movie that Chuck Norris filmed and all of his high kicks, all jeans.
Yeah, but Chuck Norris had specialty jeans for those because you could buy them in magazines.
I remember that. Yeah, and so this is actually a point where I was thinking to myself, like, so this movie is supposed to be about stuntmen taking a gig outside of their world that's not stunts, right? But the movie really is just about stuntmen wanting to do more stunts. Not even wanting this like special gig. They're just wanting to do more movie as they want to work on it. I know Steve is starting to get antsy and wants something bigger, but Rod's just all in on the career of them being stuntmen. And then that's when they're in a park and they're shooting a commercial, and like Rod's getting hooked up in like a yank vest, and they put him in this big slingshot and reef him across the thing.
Which eventually you see is basically that's just precursor to the gag at the very end too.
Yes,
it's like they're showing you. It's almost like they threw it in because they felt it wasn't obvious enough for what they did at the end of the movie. They better slap this in here so you see what they're actually doing.
Well, this is like the classic, like in the James Bond movies where he goes and sees Q and he gets all these gags, all these gadgets, and then every one of those gadgets is so specific, and then he finds a perfect use for it.
Right.
So a little spoon feeding for sure.
So so they've agreed to it, and then they're sketching it all out. They've got like a model, and they're trying because of the entire.
There's the one other part where Steve just randomly mentions, "Oh, by the way, I've got a safety gig for the fire department this afternoon," and then it just cuts to him on fire, walking out of a hut.
Right.
And then you're like, "Oh, he gets another burn in." They put him out, and then after that, they're like, "Let's go see Culpepper." Like, but it's just mid conversation. They're like, well, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I've got this meeting with the fire department," just to put in another burn. But
yeah, so then they go to Culpepper, and that's when Rod meets Culpepper's wife, or sorry, not wife, secretary.
Yes.
He meets her secretary and is instantly smitten with her.
They go into Culpepper's office, and he says, "Well, would you guys like any drinks or refreshments?" And they're both like, "No, we're good." And then Culpepper says, "Oh, that's fine, because it would have been only tea anyways." It's just a weird line.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, okay. But the guy playing Culpepper is obviously having fun with the role. So he's just enjoying himself.
Yeah, that is Noel Ferrier. He is he was a classic Aussie TV guy. He was in bit parts all over the place. I think some of the Australian drama.
He is obviously just enjoying himself in this role because he just gets to be this smug sort of know-it-all and
secret agency guy.
Yeah, everything's working the way he's orchestrated, kind of thing. And so he's got this giant model set of the complex. He whips open the thing and like part of the roof of like the smokestack or whatever falls off, and he's like, "Oh, we used to have really good model makers, but they all went to work in film."
It's actually a really good line. it played
Yeah.
out so well. I almost wondered if it was ad-lib, because when he pulls the sheet off it and it breaks like that,
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, it was quite funny.
Made me laugh.
When they agree to do it, they have to go spend a week at the farm, I think they call it, where they get put through their paces and they have to work out and get shape and stuff like that. And they do it for like, I don't know, 3 hours, I guess.
So
They run an obstacle course in their jeans.
And then Culpepper mentions that they can't send government people because they don't want any association.
Because they're sending them into
And-
this thing in the Philippines.
Yeah, and so this is it's some kind of facility in the Philippines that has a vault with some
I wouldn't call it a vault, Sam.
that they need to take.
There's two safes in the middle of.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of a factory, basically.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming for sure. The spin is that these guys can't be associated with any country or any government force.
Right.
So they're essentially mercenaries at this point.
Yeah, never mind the fact that they're using a submarine to get them close.
Yeah, it's the classic Mission Impossible type thing where Culpepper says, like, neither him or the department have ever heard of these guys, have heard of them, and
they have 10 hours to complete their mission, and 10 hours and 1 second, that sub is heading back home, with or without them.
And then they kind of agree, and then they just go have a party back at Rudd's house.
Yeah, Gloria's there, the secretary to Culpepper, and they're basically putting stuff together in numbered water bottles.
Yeah, and they're also just having a good time and filling up these water flasks. And then Steve says something to Rudd, and they're out on his waterfront home, up on this like cliff, and he says something, and then Rudd says, "Well, if you want my opinion," and then you just hear this massive explosion. And it cuts to Rudd, and he just fires a cannon. Like he has a giant, like Civil War era cannon on his front lawn.
But this is also like they realize that they've never worked out how much they're going to get paid for this, if at all. Steve's wife asks Gloria, and she's like, "Well, they'll get something." But Culpepper like keeps a pretty firm eye on his budget, so it's like.
And I think this is where Steve is more like he's just more in again because, like you said,
dude needs a new drug.
This is when they get shipped out to a training facility. It's like a castle.
Yeah, and they have to go run this obstacle course, and they're supposed to be distracted by explosions, basically, and they get shot at.
They have to climb a cargo net, and they're sprinting. They do some skeet shooting, and it almost looks like a triathlon or something, and they're running through. Mind you, the whole thing takes place in our favorite location, a quarry.
Yes, it does. And they run the obstacle course, and they're like, no. And he's like, well, there's one more thing you got to do. The civil servant, or dude from Chain Reaction.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's standing there, and he's like full out, kung fu gi, overacting the whole time, doing all these.
It's super flamboyant. Yeah.
And then you cut to them basically like throwing him through a wall.
Yeah, it's a very cool. It's that Indiana Jones moment where there's this guy and he's showcasing all his skills, and then Indy just hip shoots him.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing. This guy's this crazy kung fu master, and then it cuts to an exterior shot, and the guy's just flying through a door, and they like dust their hands. Like it's pretty funny. I laughed. It was a good.
Yeah,
clip.
and then they're done with their training because like they're leaving, and that's when they go back and we have the party and. All that stuff, right?
But meanwhile, they also go and take a stunt job because then they're at the speedway and they jump some cars.
That's right.
So they're supposed to be prepared for this big serious mission, and then like Rudd out of nowhere is just like, I got to take the gig at the local speedway, and then he jumps some cars.
Well, they got a week, right? They are expected to be on the farm for a week, so.
But then they're working on the cars at the speedway, and they discuss something about some smoke and effects bombs that they use on the stunt car. That maybe they can use that to scare Hernandez, which is like the leader bad guy in the Philippines.
And this is where
it's weird. It's a little disconnected.
Yeah, and this is where they come up with the idea to create all the water bottles that are that are numbered, and essentially they're explosives. But they're more flashbang than anything else.
Yeah, and then we go back, and it's sort of the last night where the guys we get another champagne bottle popping, and
Rod and Gloria are having a good evening.
I guess the idea is they're going to take the submarine, and then Rudd gives Bismarck a big kiss, and he's wearing a hat this time. His dog is wearing like this denim cap. It's an adorable dog.
Yes.
they're standing on the submarine now. And that's when the submarine captain says, we're going to take you to the pickup point, and 10 hours, 10 minutes later, you got to be back or you guys are done.
Yeah. And so they get there, the submarine surfaces, 2 Zodiacs, and they're loading some gear into one of them. And the other guy Rod hops into his with just his backpack. And Steve gets in and he's got all these poles along with his backpack. And it's just like, yeah. So this is where we realize that Rod is like infiltrating the base and getting the plans and everything. And Steve's just the getaway driver, really.
1 hour, 13 minutes into a 90-minute movie.
Yes, finally we have the mission that, we've only known about for 20 minutes. And yeah.
Now they've split up, and this sequence is a little intercut of them both doing their own tasks, where they're on either side of the island. And basically this whole sequence is Rod climbing a rock wall, a cliff face.
Yep.
To showcase some more of his rappelling skills and everything else. You don't really see what Steve is doing with the gear that he has. He's going around the other side of the island and he's dragging it up through the woods, but you don't. Right. And then this is where Steve comes across a tripwire with a landmine.
And he spends a lot of time. He gets some foam and he sprays it all over the landmine. But then it's like, I'm watching this whole thing and he hasn't hit his leg is against the tripwire. But they very clearly show us that it has not pulled the cable. And if the cable comes out of the landmine goes off. And the landmine is strapped to the side of a tree.
Yeah, and he sprays it, my interpretation of this is he's trying to super cool it to try and slow down the reactionary of the charge if it does go off, to give him another second or two.
And meanwhile, he's like twisting himself around and stuff while his leg is pulling on this cable. And then essentially he just kind of backs his leg off the cable and it's all fine.
And also the music. This is supposed to be a very intense scene, and the music is just the wrong kind of music for this moment. It's a little chipper. It's not very dramatic, or
should be steel drums.
Yeah. Oh God. Could only hope. More steel drums for everything. And
it's a Commando reference for those who don't get it.
Everybody gets Commando references, Jason. It's just these back and forth thing where Rod's climbing the wall, Steve's getting set up, he's stuck on this landmine, little too dramatic, and then he finally steps away from it. While there's also this intercut subplot with Culpepper and Steve's wife are playing chess.
Yeah, with like the wildest chessboards you've ever seen in your life.
Yes, they're gigantic chess pieces.
They look like tiki mugs.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, actually, but I don't know the reasoning for why this sequence exists.
No, well, just I guess to show you that Culpepper keeps getting his ass kicked at chess. And it's his idea. Yeah, because he calls her and says, would you like me to come over? Do you play chess? She's like, yes, I do. And so, he keeps her company while her husband is off risking his life for his queen and country. Oh, I meant to ask you, when they're going back a bit, when they are first at the base where Culpepper tells him everything he wants him to do, he goes into that room where the model is. There's a list of photographs along the wall. So it's like Mao's up there, Stalin's up there. The last one, I took a look at it and I couldn't figure it out, but I think that was the current Prime Minister of Australia. I'm trying to remember his name, but I looked him up because I was like, that's got to be an Australian, because they look at it and they laugh, and because it's all these evil people up.
That's so funny. I did not notice that.
With each other, and then Culpepper even makes this remark about, now you're looking at our interior design. If you're done,
that actually says a lot about this movie. Yeah. It's just lighthearted fun. They're trying to have fun with it. Back at the facility, Rod is running around and he is putting these thermoses, these numbered thermoses, staging them all around in these locations, which are these charges supposedly, but just water bottles with numbers on them. And I think like the way they hide and like in the woods and they're crawling around while the guards are wearing it, it's meant to sort of simulate like this is how they moved in Vietnam, because it's the same sort of thing. They're crawling around in the underbrush and they're waiting for guards to move back and forth. It's fun. It's just not really exciting. So far, their quote-unquote stunt abilities have been able to climb a rock wall. And then, like, I just said to myself, I feel like a soldier would have been way better at this job. Like, it's the classic Armageddon, which, I'll never fault that movie because it's perfect. But it is like, it's easier to train oil rig guys to be space astronauts than it is to train astronauts to drill.
Yeah, didn't Ben Affleck bring that up with?
Yeah, he just yelled at him.
Michael Bay, and he just told him to shut the F up.
He's a great human being.
At one point, there's a guy with essentially like a massive machine gun that's chasing
Yeah,
Rod.
I saw that show. It's great. It was a big M60.
Yeah, that dude was white. He had,
from the Philippines.
yeah, definitely not from the Philippines. He was a white dude. It looks like they applied some bronzer or something to his skin.
And that's a funny hero shot too.
Yeah.
Like that is like a Rambo shot when he's in that. The camera's just locked off and he's holding that thing just ripping.
Well,
on
we
it.
should point out all these guys are dressed like they work at a nuclear power plant. They all have yellow hard hats on and white overalls.
They look like the Beastie Boys intergalactic music video.
Exactly. They're all dressed like that, except that they're also all carrying guns because I guess they certainly don't look and dress like soldiers.
No,
but it's like they all look like they should be checking levels on a nuclear power plant or something, and yet.
Yeah, these guys fall into that category, even though this movie's the 70s. They definitely fall into that 1980s low-rent villain type thing where none of it makes sense and they all just have guns and they're running around a facility.
Yeah. Well, I have a note of endless henchmen
Yes.
at one point because
that is exactly what this is.
Like they keep coming from nowhere, and as much as Rod's running around with a gun at one point, he never shoots any of them. So Rod's just risking his life, and you realize that Steve's got it easy. Steve is you eventually figure out, is putting together a hang glider, and this sort of elastic bungee launch system for them.
For the giant slingshot between some trees.
Slingshot. Yeah, that's a good word for it. And it's essentially a reverse of the same gag that they used to do the shotgun effect earlier in the movie. And so that's all he's doing is putting that together. And Rod's running around dropping all these water bottles everywhere for distractions, and then eventually makes his way to where the safe is. But he's already been seen at this point, right? So he gets caught.
But he says to him, they hold him at gunpoint, and he says, I don't speak English. And he's like scrambling around. And then he convinces him, he shows them the detonator, and he convinces them to press buttons on the detonator for him.
It's a camera. That it's because it's a camera. He tells them it's a camera. So they go to do it, and of course they press the one that makes an explosion go, and he grabs it from him and runs and gets away. Like hides for a bit and then gets away. Gets to the safe. He's got the combination written in ballpoint pen on his arm.
Yes, which is not the best choice if you're going to be in a submarine and in a Zodiac and other places with water.
And it's still legible.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly. Yeah, they're wearing wetsuits, which would not help whatsoever.
And Steve also takes the hang glider to another point on the island now. So this gives him one more use of the hang glider before they're together, because Steve assembles it, and now this is intercut. Steve is way up in the air in this hang glider, just flying around the island for a minute.
Rod's making his way out. At one point, he's hanging from this high overpass bridge thing while hiding from soldiers. He's just sort of hanging there, and that's when Steve sees him over there, and he's like...
Rod hops on a conveyor belt for the sake of another stunt and rides a conveyor belt.
Yep, so he can slide it down.
Yep, and then he falls into a gravel pit and does like a tumble right into the camera, which they both start gearing up by the hang glider and like strapping each other to each other. And
they're getting shot at, and Steve's throwing some smoke down, so it's like now everybody knows where they are. They slingshot themselves out of there, and they make it back to the sub.
Except as they set the slingshot up, when they start to slingshot themselves forward, it's a close-up of their legs running, and you don't see the apparatus because you could never get this to work. And it's just this insert shot of them running forward of like 4 legs.
Yeah.
And then you cut to them, and they're way in the air. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And they fly back, and the guys on the sub are shocked that they made it out.
And then again, with this same fashion, this reminded me very much of DEFCON 4. You just see a shot of the hang glider in the ocean. Like you don't see it touching down or anything, and it's just like the pod from DEFCON 4. They're in space, and now it's on the ground. And and they're celebrating at the art gallery.
They're home. Like
this wraps up really quick.
They have a rap party to go to, basically, this is where our German director comes back in.
But also, they solve the thing, but there's no like, congratulations, you saved the country, or congratulations, you've done. They just get on the submarine, and now they're at a party. Like,
We have no idea what these documents actually are, what they're good for, what they're needed for. It's just, yep.
yep.
You never find it. They're just at this party now, and the director jumps up and introduces the film, and they run it, and it's a deodorant commercial.
I laughed, dude. I
Yeah.
was not excited. And that's a really good gag because you're like, what is this? And it's exactly that, just a deodorant commercial.
Yeah.
It's very underwhelming. And the last line in the film is really great, actually. It just crash zooms onto Steve, and he's on the couch, and he says, well, it's a living.
Yeah.
And then the
I mean,
credits.
yeah. I mean, it's too bad they didn't turn this into a franchise or something, because this was basically the Fall Guy before the Fall Guy.
Yeah. And well, what this feels like to me is Hooper, And
Oh, yeah.
Because if you think about like J. Michael Vincent and Burt Reynolds, in that movie, they're truly just stuntmen and they play it the whole way through. This has a fun twist on it. It's like stuntmen being recruited to do some serious stuff. Yeah. And it has all the right bones to it. It just lands a little soft, but I was very charmed, very entertained. Good, lighthearted Aussie humor.
Yep. Again, it was fun. It's another one that some of these Ozploitation movies, they're just crafted well.
Yeah. And I mean, back to Brian Trenchard-Smith, he's pretty good. He makes good stuff.
Yeah. He knew what he was doing.
So 5.4 on IMDb.
Yeah. It's probably about right. Maybe a smidge low.
No, you know what? I think what I'm getting at here is Frog Dreaming is too damn high.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I would put this, if Frog Dreaming is a 6, I would put this as 6.5. So I think what we need to do is we need to reduce the IMDb rating of Frog Dreaming and then
down to like a 4.
Yeah, and then a 5.4 for this movie tracks pretty good.
It's a bit above average.
When I was watching this, I was like, I've seen this movie before, and not saying this movie was after these movies, but a modern polished version of this movie is the Vin Diesel movie Triple X, where he's this thrill seeker, extreme sports guy, and then gets recruited by a secret government agency to do something the government can't do.
Right.
And a more on the level movie of that, I would say, is the Eiger Sanction with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually saw that one now that I think about it.
It's
definitely
great.
it's on my list.
It's very cool. It's a secret agent film, and Clint Eastwood is a rock climber, and it's like set in Switzerland. It's a great movie, and it has some really little more James Bondy vibe to this. Like, this movie sits right in the middle, and you could make this movie a lot more intense and a lot darker, and it could still be really good with some light humor, but you could add a bit more seriousness to it, a bit more grit, a bit more sense of threat, and it could be a really cool movie. So would you remake it?
Well, I mean, like you kind of pointed out, it's already been done, so probably not. But I mean, if you did it, you took the very basic of it, sure. If you were going to remake it, it would have to be the bulk of the story is going to be the raid on the place.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have Rod do all the work. It would have to be more of a team effort. But
to your point about Rod doing all the work, that whole end sequence in the warehouse, John Hargraves, Steve, was actually injured in one of the first day shoots there, like doing stunts.
Oh, wow.
So all of the stuff where Steve is doing things is actually Grant Page also. So Rod plays Grant Page in all the stunts at the end, doubled both himself and Steve's character for all the gags, like falling and jumping and the hang gliding and everything else.
Oh, wow.
The guy's like a Superman. It's pretty kind of cool. So for as much pedigree as in this film, like both these two, great Aussie icons and the director, there's not much, there's not much press on this. There's no 40 years later, this movie, there's no documentaries. I was a little bummed to find there's just not much, retrospective or anything on this film. There's no special features. It truly is a little bit of a lost film.
Right. Well, fitting then for us to cover it like we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Composed by Peter Martin, who we were talking about. And he's credited on TV usually as a songwriter, which I made a note because that makes a bit more sense with the music as it's just pieces. It's not this collective score across the movie.
Right.
It was cut by Ron Williams, and he's also cut, which we will be soon to watch in the Brian Trenchard-Smith Hour, The Man from Hong Kong. So same editor that will be showing up again. I had fun, man.
Yeah, no, so did I. I enjoyed it. It was similar to Chain Reaction. I just kind of kept watching it.
Yeah, these are good. Thanks a
Okay.
lot for joining me on this adventure.
Thank you. And I think the next one we're going to do is The Time Guardian.
I'm looking forward to that. I know nothing about that movie, and that looks fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know what we're in for at all, but
I don't know how I missed that movie. Like, I watched the trailer for it when you mentioned it, and I was like, how did I never see this? This seems like something I would have watched.
no, if you've done more than I have, I've only looked at the poster and went, that's it.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to be something. So join us on that for episode 12 on anything but casino. Thanks, man.
Therefore, whatever appears on the television screen emerges as raw experience for those who watch it. Therefore, television is reality, and reality is less than television.